all please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance?
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to thank everybody for being here. Can I get a roll call?
Mr. Cook?
Here.
Mr. D'Andriano?
Here.
Mr. Rogan?
Here.
Ms. Smith? Here. Mr. Williams?
Here. Somebody like to audit the bills?
I'll make a motion the town board approve abstract number 15 dated August 10th, 2018 in the amount of $441,323.44. So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Mr. Cook, you're up.
Last week, we had a special meeting, which was really sort of a workshop, work session type meeting for the board to exchange their thoughts on this recycling center cell tower. We had a rep from Wireless Edge, and we asked him some questions and went back and forth. Meeting wasn't very long because we had, what was it, zoning board or planning board?
Zoning board.
Zoning board coming in right after us. So anyhow, towards the end of the meeting, there are some residents who wish to express some thoughts. So right now, I would ask if anybody wants to have their say on this at this point, then to come up to the microphone and say whatever you want to say.
Well, let's not say whatever you want to say.
So.
Good evening, Bruce Major, 166 Somerset. I think it would have been helpful if we could know what is the status of the lease agreement, what are the facts and particulars in the lease agreement. I think we'd be then in a better position to speak to that. Or do you even have a lease agreement?
We have before us tonight both a lease agreement, a modified lease agreement from the one we've been looking at, and also a resolution.
Okay.
So, Jordan, do you want to go through the lease agreement, or John, or would you like me to do it?
Whatever your preference is.
My preference is you.
Sure. Diana can.
Good evening, Honorable Supervisor, members of the Town Board. Jordan Fry from Snyder & Snyder, 94 White Plains Road, Tarrytown, New York, here on behalf of Wireless Edge. So following the August 15th work session, we received comments from the town with respect to certain questions regarding the lease. A revised lease was prepared. The lease is for the placement of a approximately 166-foot tall communications tower together with related equipment at the base, the recycling center. So it would be for an initial term of 10 years with 4 additional 10-year terms. The business terms with respect to the, just some background. The MTA has indicated to the town that it no longer is willing to pay rent to Wireless Edge. So taking that into consideration and the financial burden that would be on the tower owner, Wireless Edge, we had addressed that in the lease. Certain business terms, the main business terms are that the town would receive a monthly income of $1,500 per month, which equals $18,000 per year with 2% annual increases. That's with respect to the first wireless, the portion that the town would receive for the first wireless carrier that would sign up. Again, the MTA is not paying any money to Wireless Edge for the town at this time. Now, with respect to that, that first amount from the wireless carrier, the revenue share, one of the items that has been changed is that Wireless Edge has the opportunity to recoup its capital investment not to exceed $250,000 and not to exceed 5 years prior to the town receiving its revenue share. Again, there's no, what's typically called an anchor tenant in the wireless industry. There's no wireless carrier that's signed up, and the MTA is not paying any rent. As the town knows, this is the only wireless tower vendor who has proposed the opportunity to help the town in a situation where the town is trying to create a different option other than the MTA over at 164. In order for Wireless Edge to accommodate that, there had to be some business terms that had to change. That being said, again, Wireless Edge is the only vendor out there, and they're taking a huge burden and financial risk. The business terms also include 20% revenue share from the subsequent wireless communication carriers that would come along, as well as 30% revenue share from narrowband co-locators. Typically, that's like a whip-style antenna co-locator. Other than that, there's not anything else those are the business terms. If there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them, but those are the main business terms.
Just one quick one. It's a monopole?
Correct, it's a monopole.
One additional thing I think we should talk about, and that's the fact that we've included in here now the option if MTA does not co-locate on the tower with notice from the town, the lease would be done.
Correct. The lease provides a provision that after the governmental approvals are obtained by Wireless Edge, that if the MTA hasn't provided a letter of intent or an application or anything else, including a signed sublease agreement, that the town, following a 1-year period after the governmental approvals, would have an option to terminate the lease, which I know is very important to the town, and Wireless Edge was able to accommodate that request.
Do you have any confidence that Metro North MTA is going to go onto the tower?
You know, there's been a lot of discussions between the MTA, the town, and Wireless Edge. What I can tell you is that Wireless Edge is providing the infrastructure. The town is providing the MTA the opportunity to the extent that the lease is executed. If the MTA, the opportunity for the MTA to come onto Wireless Edge's tower is there, if the town approves the lease. It's up to the MTA if they want to go on the tower. It's ultimately their choice. But both the town and Wireless Edge have worked very hard to meet all the deadlines that the MTA has requested, and now Wireless Edge is even offering the tower to the MTA at no cost. This is something that came to Wireless Edge late in the game. They were able to accommodate that. John revised the business terms. John Arthur of Wireless Edge revised the business terms. He's put the opportunity out there. What I would say to the town is that to the extent the town does want to go forward with Wireless Edge, and that the political influence of the town can, you know, kind of push back to the MTA to say, hey, look, we've done everything we were supposed to do. Wireless Edge is providing the infrastructure. That's the best I can tell you. I can't tell you what the MTA is going to do, but what I can tell you is that my client, together with working with the town, has provided the opportunity for that to happen. But I can't tell you what the MTA ultimately is going to do.
But to date, they have not indicated any movement towards joining the tower at the recycling.
The MTA has not provided anything in writing. All the MTA has stated is town and Wireless Edge, you move forward, you do the best that you can do, and we'll see how things progress. And that's all the assurances. So Wireless Edge has, there's a lot of due diligence and a lot of expenses that they've already incurred to this point. But Mr. Arthur has pushed forward. He's everything he said he would do, he has done. And likewise with respect to the town, being able to be at this meeting, the date that they wanted the town to make a decision as to whether or not they were going to go through, we're here.
Right. What about other carriers? Is there any movement in that direction for other carriers?
I can't speak to what the other, if other carriers are interested at this point in time. What I can tell you though is that if the town does move forward and the tower is built, there's going to be new wireless infrastructure that the town is providing an opportunity for the wireless carriers to co-locate on, and that's a good thing, that the infrastructure is already in place such that when the carriers, if they are ready and willing to come, it will be there, and seamless wireless communication services can be provided to the town from that tower, including E911 services, capacity offload. So the infrastructure is in place. You would be a step, the town would be a step ahead in terms of getting ahead of the game and providing the necessary infrastructure. And might I add that this is all at Wireless Edge's cost. The capital investment is at Wireless Edge's risk. Now look, there is that provision in the lease that for 5 years John has the right to recoup his fees. That would be Wireless Edge, but he's taking the risk that someone's going to sign up. He doesn't know if that, there's no guarantees. Two carriers, T-Mobile and Sprint, are in the talks of merging. So think about from John's perspective, John Arthur's perspective, the amount of risk that he's taking. But the infrastructure will be there, and that's important. And the other thing I want to note is that if the tower's on the town's property as opposed to the MTA, there's building codes that Mr. Arthur and Wireless Edge have to follow. You can watch to make sure that there's no debris, that everything is in compliance with code. So not only are you building infrastructure, but you're also protecting your town by offering this opportunity. We all know that it's up to the MTA, but you're offering the infrastructure for the town. Your code enforcement officers will see the site. It's on town property. They can enforce if there's any issues. They can enforce the code. So there's a lot of opportunity that's being provided with respect to the lease that's being proposed.
So are we, when MTA says move forward, do they mean start construction and then they'll see, or are we waiting for a commitment from them before we would start any construction?
Ultimately, I think we would need to see the commitment with respect to the MTA, and unless something else changed where a wireless carrier became interested. But ultimately, what's going to happen is, if to the extent that the town board wants to move forward with the lease, I would expect that the town board would go back to the MTA and say, and of course with Wireless Edge's assistance, we've done what we said we would do. We need you now to give our vendor, our new tenant, assurances so that they can continue to move forward and meet your deadlines. I can't tell you what the MTA is going to do. I can only tell you that we're affording the opportunity.
So there's the possibility, just to go back to the rent for a minute, that you would build the cell tower, and if you did not have any carriers, Warner or any carriers on there, the town would not receive any rent for 5 years.
So yes, there is that possibility, but I have to remind you though that the town is not spending any money in terms of providing this infrastructure, and so you have to think of it that way. Wireless Edge and the town are working together in order to provide that alternate site that many of the residents, prefer, opposed to the 164 tower. So yes, and again, that wasn't the initial offer. The initial offer was for the town to receive revenue, but the MTA changed their business terms about 2 weeks ago.
Staying right there, same question. Is it conceivable within the terms of this lease that MTA could go up on the tower, sit there for 5 years and not have any other carrier? So we receive no income for 5 years, and then 5 years later, we get Verizon to go on, and we still have another 5 years to go. So we wouldn't be receiving any revenue for approximately 10 years.
No, that's
No?
not the business terms. The business terms are that for 5 years, John's got the ability, when I say John Arthur, CEO of Wireless Edge, he's got 5 years to recoup his fees. After that 5-year period, if a carrier was to come on, the town would be entitled to that initial $1,500 a month rental. So that's the business risk that Wireless Edge is taking, is that, you know, a carrier will come, a carrier, you know, hopefully more than one carrier. But the answer is after 5 years, then the town would receive rent. And now look, it could be before 5 years. It could be before, if the carriers come. But the recoupment clause in the proposed agreement is that the vendor has 5 years, and then after that, then the town would receive the rent so long as a carrier came on.
So regardless of when the carrier comes on, there's a 5-year recoupment period.
Correct.
So if the carrier doesn't come on for 5 years, then at 5 years, we would start that recoupment period.
If 5 years and 1 day a carrier signed a lease and started paying rent, then the town would get that $1,500, and it wouldn't go towards the capital investment that is in the lease, the recoupment investment.
Jordan, Don Rossi, that's true with other co-locators too. Is that correct? Just so at 5 years and a day, a carrier signs on. The town at that point is entitled to the $1,500 a month rent, and then day 2, a second carrier signs on. The town's entitled to the percentage.
Correct.
That's provided for in the lease.
Correct. John, you have anything to add to that?
No, that's exactly how it
Okay.
Okay. Section 6, assignment. One of my concerns was that the way the original lease was written, that the tenant was in full control about basically assigning the rights for the cell tower to another individual, another company. I had asked for some language to be put in there saying that the town had prior consent of whoever you were to
Correct.
sell the cell tower to. And you put that in there. You also then added additional language which says that without the consent of the landlord, you can sell the structure providing certain criteria are met. I'm still concerned about that. As I said, as a government entity, we're limited on who we can lease property to. And, I'm concerned that you would lease it to somebody that may not qualify under our rules.
Okay, so I think if you were interested in adding so let's just take a step back. We know that towers, just like real estate, people acquire them because they're investments, right? So, but at the same time, I understand the town's concern that for a couple purposes. Number one, you would want someone who's qualified. So if Crown Castle, for example, who's a very major tower company, acquired it, we would assume that they're qualified because they manage numerous towers, and they would have the wherewithal to continue to operate and have the funds. That's just an example. What maybe we could also add is, subject to, necessary governmental, background checks in connection with, security purposes. Is something like that acceptable to you? I think you just want to make sure that you're getting, so they need to have experience, assets, and we can add that they have, subject to typical due diligence purposes, and to the extent that there was any criminal activity, things like that.
Yeah, no criminal activity. They are not on a disbarment list. I can't sit here and rattle off all the criteria that we need to consider when we're saying, letting a bid go. But
Right, I think, Jordan, generally, business plan aside, there are some provisions that we will have some comments on. So-
I think we can agree subject to reasonable governmental background searches. I think, is that something that you'd be okay with?
Yeah, we could hit that.
Because that would cover, you would do your due diligence,
Right.
and then there's the other elements where it's someone who has over $5 million in assets, has experience. So I think we could agree to adding
Okay.
subject to governmental due diligence for background check purposes.
I have one last issue, and that's Section 9 termination, where it allows that the tenant has the right of first refusal for a period of 10 years for the use of the property.
So the reason for that clause is if the town exercises its right to terminate because the MTA does not sign up to go on the tower. We've done all the due diligence. Wireless Edge has done all the surveys, has done all the work, has committed as the one vendor on August 22nd, 2018, who's willing to stand here for the town and take the financial risk. If the town terminates and then a couple of years later a wireless carrier wants to use the town's property, the recycling center, it would only be fair that if the town receives a bona fide offer for a lease, that you would go back to Wireless Edge and give them the opportunity to match it. That's all we're asking for.
But I want it limited to Wireless Edge, not that he can sell that right to somebody else, as he can sell this lease to somebody else.
Okay, I would say Wireless Edge or its affiliate. If there's some restructuring, but as long as it's the Wireless Edge or its affiliates, I think we could agree to that.
All right. You have anything else to add?
No, I think what I stated is pretty clear. I think the town and Wireless Edge have given the MTA, and I will state that, by no means am I trying to, take shots at the MTA. I know that their intent is to provide wireless communication services for their communications, including, police communications for the MTA. We're here tonight to offer that opportunity, and that's, that's available if the town wants to move forward. We do know how important the MTA's communications are, and Wireless Edge's infrastructure will provide the MTA with that opportunity. So I do want to make that clear.
Okay. I have two more comments, questions, more for John than...
Sure. John, why don't you come up?
John, in the design of the tower, would you consider putting up a stealth tower? Something that looks like a tree? Not that anybody likes the way they look.
I wouldn't, and the reason is that a stealth tree is going to cost approximately $150,000 more to install than a regular monopole. So not only, let's say that this pole is going to be about $45,000, and that's an actual number. A tree We just did a tree not long ago, it was $130,000 just for the tree. So it's $100,000 more for the structure roughly. Then the installation probably adds another $30,000 to the foundation, another $30,000 for the installation. So it really becomes cost prohibitive at that point to take that much financial risk, because you're turning a $250,000 site into a $400,000 site.
Okay. Second question is, when I started down this path about trying to find better locations than the 164, my original intent was for Metro North to consider 2 cell towers as opposed to 1, and in doing so, we could lower the height. And it seems we keep getting stuck at this 150, 160 height. Your tower currently is proposed at 166, which I know from coverage maps we've received from others is, well, we had adequate coverage at a lower height. So, you know, again, I was looking for a cell tower of a 120, 140 height, which would have negligible impact visually on the surrounding areas. Is there any opportunity here to bring the height of this tower down?
I mean, I would say that, you know, a lot of it's going to be driven by what the MTA is going to go for, but, you know, my consideration is, you know, what can I get on there commercially? So if you look at where we're at now, so we're at 166, so that's what the MTA mount is. 160 is where the first carrier would be. So it'd be 160, 150, 140, 130. So your bottom carrier with 4 carriers in the market is at 130, and we usually have an extra slot at 10 feet below that for a future carrier. So even at the 130, if you have trees in the area that are, you know, 90 feet, you're not that far above the tree level. As you start moving it down, once the carriers get to 20 feet above that tree canopy, that signal is getting attenuated such that the carrier's going to have a problem. The first thing the carrier's going to do is come back to us and ask us for an extension. And we'd rather just design the site from day one, not extendable, and it is what it is.
All right, so for full disclosure, these are not conversations John and I have had here tonight for the first time, but I did want to get it on the record.
I mean, for me, I'd rather have a smaller pole because a smaller pole is cheaper. Less foundation, less steel. So, you know, I could save $20,000 or so on a pole if I was to do a 120-foot pole. I just would be concerned about having something that we can market to the carriers. And if we have a site that's 120 feet with the MT on the top, the next carrier is going at 114, they may not want that. And then they're going to go look for another site. It defeats the whole purpose.
Is it possible to put up a shorter pole and then extend it if we need to?
It is. As long as what we could do is we could design the pole at whatever the minimum height that MTA requires. And we typically, when we do that, we design so many locations down and then so many locations up. So it might be, you know, 3 down and 2 up, so we have kind of a flexibility. But that would be subject to the MTA being willing to move. And if a carrier that would come along that wants to extend the pole would have to pay the cost for them to relocate. MTA would have to be willing to have the downtime while that extension is being put in place, which might be a several-day event.
But from your perspective, that's a reasonable request?
We do that on some occasions. You know, particularly when a site is fairly low. In the future, we would have a better opportunity to push that cost for the extension on a wireless carrier. So I wouldn't be concerned about the recouping costs for that part of it. So it's doable, but the first question would be to the MTA, what is the height that you're willing to go for? They come back and say, well, we can go at 140, and assuming that MTA is willing to go along with a relocation clause, which allows them to move up, then we would be amenable to that. That said, 20 feet or so is not that much of a difference. The average person probably wouldn't be able to tell the difference between a 130-foot pole and a 150-foot pole.
If it's in your backyard, I think they might be able to tell.
Well, we do a lot of balloon tests, and people look at the balloons and they say, "Oh, that doesn't look so bad." You say, "Well, how high is that?" "Well, it's 150 feet," and they thought it was 100 feet. So it's kind of a perception.
Mm-hmm. Understood. Anyone else?
I have another question. In regards to the lease agreement, for subletting, in the event that you did sublet, would we be afforded the opportunity to renegotiate the monthly income?
Well, if we didn't have any income
With the new
coming in,
tenant?
we wouldn't want to be paying the town the income. Because already, so let's just say MTA is the only one on the pole. So our operating costs, just to run insurance and maintenance, might be $3,000 a year. So we're already burning $3,000 a year just to keep the structure in place, not even including our own internal management. So we wouldn't want to add to that a ground rent when we don't have any income coming in.
Just gonna add, the other point to that is that when the subsequent, not the first wireless carrier, but when the subsequent carriers come, you're getting a revenue share of whatever Wireless Edge receives. It's in Wireless Edge's best interest to get the best rent they possibly can, which means that it's in your best interest. So that structure is a good structure for the town.
And one other item was the termination. If, in the event it's terminated and the pole needs to be taken down, I didn't see in the first agreement, this one's revised, is there an amount of time where that you would be taking this tower down?
You're saying at the end of the lease, or if there's no, if MTA comes off and there's no use of the pole?
We're not using it anymore,
Right.
and
She wants to know if they exercise their right to terminate because the MTA doesn't come on, how long would it take me to take the tower down?
Well, realistically, if the MTA is not coming on, we're not going to order a tower, because what are we going to do with the tower? So we want to be sure that they're coming on before we go forward with that. In the future, if a tower had to come down, it's typically a 30-day process. It's just a matter of getting contractor mobilized.
Demolition.
but a
Yeah.
guarantee of, if it's going to take 30 days, but if it's sitting there for 5 years, we're waiting for those 30 days to come and be taken down.
So
That's
you're looking,
just-
for example, we have within the lease, 10 years plus 4 extensions, so 50 years. At the end of 50 years, that tower needs to come down because we're not extending the lease anymore. They would need to take that tower down within 3 months?
Yeah, so if there's a reason to take the tower down, we could stipulate what the time period would be. I mean, typically there's a notice period anyway, so, there's a notice period and there's a time that the lease ends. So if that's 4 months or 6 months, then that's really the time period that we have to work within. I mean, really, we're supposed to have that tower down by the end of that period.
I think if you're looking for a time frame to the extent that the town exercises its termination right with the MTA. If you're looking for a time frame, you're looking for a time frame that to the extent the tower is actually built and the MTA doesn't come and the town exercises its right, I think we can agree to, Wireless Edge could probably do it in a much faster fashion, but how about we'll make sure it's down in 1 year.
Yeah, to me, that sounds fair. Just some type of commitment to say it's not going to sit there forever if it's not in use.
Yeah, I think, can
Yeah,
you?
I mean, realistically, if there's no one using it, the MTA is not using it. I'm sure if the MTA needs to use the site, they're going to want to have the tower there. If they're not using it, and there's no wireless carriers, the last thing I want is a tower where I'm incurring expenses every year to maintain it. And if there's no hope in sight for a wireless carrier to come on, then, yeah, I'm going to want to terminate the lease and cut those expenses. So it's kind of self-policing.
I think what Mary might be getting to is, let's say in 6 years, technology changes and the carriers decide we don't need to be on the towers anymore, there's other technology, and then all the carriers come off. Would you take the tower down? Is there a time frame?
Well, under that scenario, is the MTA, if the MTA is still on the pole, then no, because they're still using the pole. Or maybe at that point, there might be town tenants on the pole.
They're not
We
paying
don't-
rent.
Yeah.
Right.
With other
That's unfortunate.
carriers, is there an average length of lease that you would have with them?
Yeah, pretty much all of our subleases are 30 years with the carriers,
How long?
30 years.
This also begs the issue of some type of security for removal.
Demo bond. Yeah. Do you have any sense of what it's cost you to take down your last tower?
We've never taken down a tower.
Because I talked to when Homeland Towers was building or proposing the tower where I work at the health department for Putnam County, I spoke with the engineers about the future of the technology and when would we see this technology be antiquated. And they thought about it for a minute and said probably in about 40 years is realistic based on satellite technology and what we would see. Now, of course, that's just their speculation, but the general contractor said that they had removed a tower recently and it was about $40,000 was the cost. Because you're not just, knocking it down. It's obviously got to be taken down piece by piece. So you're talking crane time and welders and whatever.
I mean, that could be. We have a project now is a temporary monopole that's coming down as a permanent pole, and that pole is costing us about $26,000 to take down. But we're not touching the foundation. We're reusing the foundation.
Which I think you mentioned last time. The foundation is just removed to grade, basically. You're not going to go into.
It's usually about 3 feet below grade,
Right.
just to the mat
Right.
location.
Understood. So I know that, over the years, we've talked as a town and certainly as a planning board about putting in, I don't know if you call it a performance bond, but basically a bond or an assurity that would cover demolition in case somebody walks away from the picture and just says, hey, we've dissolved our company, we're off the map, and good luck with that tower. Well, there's already some measure in place to take care of that. That doesn't account for dollars 40 years from now, but I'm sure there's measures that have been taken to address that.
I mean, generally, we don't want to have to bond over removal,
Sure.
or even, some towns want a performance bond, or they want a maintenance bond, or
Right.
removal bond. It's an administrative burden for us
Sure.
every year. It's a cost. I mean, we're paying the insurance companies for something that just never happens, and that adds to our operational cost. And if we're already at zero rent coming in, the last thing we want to do is ladle on, more payments to the insurance companies.
John, educate me a little bit here. If we say approve a cell tower that's 140 feet with the possibility of extending it, to 160 feet, based on Verizon Wireless saying that they want to go at 160 feet, they can't go any lower. Being as they're not so worried about coverage anymore and it's more about capacity, it's where we're going. What would their justification for being at the higher height be?
I mean, usually height goes to raw coverage, not necessarily capacity. Although if you don't have the tower high enough, you're not going to get to the outer edge of that capacity for coverage. On our poles, even when we design them to be extendable, we really try hard to keep the carriers in the pre-design below the level. We push them away whenever possible from utilizing an extension. So we have some extendable poles which are not utilized. But you never know. I mean, we have one pole that went up, and no sooner did that happen than AT&T wanted to come on, and they had to go above the level. So we had to actually do a 10-foot extension for them. But generally speaking, we've been able to get the carriers to go to the existing levels. And maybe you get the first two on there at that point, and maybe the third or fourth, it might be dicey, and they're the ones who are going to want to have the extension. But you're kind of pushing that off in time, and maybe down the road, technology will get to the point where the lower towers are preferred. It's really hard to predict. We have a couple of towers at the Meadowlands, and they're 120 feet because that's what the agency wanted. First carrier went on at 50 feet. It was just purely about capacity.
So the metric we would need to look at to evaluate whether an extension is warranted would be a combination of capacity within a coverage area.
I don't think you're going to be able to, yourselves or even with a consultant, get to that analysis. That's going to really make any sense or be something that you're going to impose on a carrier, because the carrier's designs change all the time. I think for this particular project, what I would say is you just go to the MTA, you say, how high do you want to be? If you don't need the 166, can you go at 146? And if they say yes, then we can make it, and that they're willing to relocate in the future or allow them to be relocated, then we'll go along with that.
Just what I would recommend if the town wants to move forward is maybe there's in the lease the exhibit could possibly provide for a 140-foot tower, but with the option at Wireless Edge's sole discretion to the extent that required to be up to 160.
Yeah, I'm not so comfortable going as far as that.
Well, ultimately, you have to remember that if the MTA decides that, and that's the specifications, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's what the MTA wanted. If the MTA doesn't get the height that they want, then the MTA may not come.
But that's not sole discretion, that's different. That's a different statement.
Well, I said to the extent that a co-locator or requests, then we can do that.
I've had 3 years worth of emails and conversations, and so I need to go back and check, but I believe somewhere I have something that said it would work at 140 feet for MTA.
Okay, well, I think we can, you can look into that, and if that's the case, then Wireless Edge would need to know, is 140 acceptable considering the carriers as you?
Yeah, if we had an opportunity to extend it, we would want to build in that structural capacity. You have to put a cap at the top so the tower can be put on. Provisions like that, you have to build it into your foundations. But generally, that's what we do. We probably do 2 or 3 carriers down and maybe 1 or 2 up, with the MTA at the 146 level, for example.
What possibly, if the town's looking to move forward tonight, is possibly we could agree to provide a revised lease exhibit for the tower elevation that would show a 140-foot tower, but with the option to extend to the extent required by the MTA or a wireless communications carrier. Something to that extent. And I think that would probably...
I'd really like to get the MTA to say, yes, that's feasible before we spend more money. Because every time we make a change, $500 goes out the door to the A&E. So
Well,
I'd just rather...
But, I also understand that the MTA is twisting our arm a little bit right now. I think it's time for us to twist back a little.
I would say we want to be on the phone tomorrow with them saying, what do you need? What's the number?
Or we could keep the exhibit as is and just have it, indicated in the written agreement that to the extent the MTA indicates that they can go lower, so long, if that's the case, then we can build it at 140, something to that extent, so that we don't have to continue to revise.
Yeah, we can do that within the body of the document. And then it's just a matter of getting, MTA says that's what it is. That's going to be in their sublease. So that's what's going to lock it in.
Does MTA know that you're not going to charge them if they were to come onto this tower?
They haven't been advised of that yet.
No.
That's pretty much that's what they told us at the last meeting.
What do you think about lowering the tower with the possibility of an extension?
Obviously, I think that's a, great idea.
Yeah.
It's going to limit the visual impact, and that's really what it comes down to. All of the discussion about the lease terms with the payments and when we would get paid, I don't want that to detract from the main conversation here, because I don't certainly want anyone in the audience to think that that is the driving force, because that would be, I think, my impression if I was worried about the tower. They're making a decision because the town's going to get money out of it. I can tell you that has nothing to do with my decision, not whatsoever. That the reality is that we undertook this process to try to find something that would be a little more palatable to our community. And the reality is we've sat here and realized that the decision stinks because there's always someone impacted. But I go back to the idea that there are people sitting in this room that have residences that are within under 400 feet from the Route 164 tower. And so when it comes down to that, unfortunately, I think it comes down to a fairly obvious choice that you have to balance direct impact versus somebody looking out onto the landscape and seeing it. And we have multiple houses, I think somewhere close to 10 houses that are within 800 feet.
I looked at the numbers. We have 20 houses that are within 1,000 feet on 164.
Okay.
We have 10 houses that are within 1,500 feet at the landfill.
Right. But some of these houses are literally 200 to 300 feet from this tower. And I know Charlie sitting here in the front row, he's about 400 feet direct line. Someone else spoke who's about 400 to 600 feet. This stinks either way, but I think for me it doesn't. I want to ensure people that the decision doesn't come down to anything related to financing. If it was a zero, the town getting a little bit of money at it, that offsets other programs, some great things that we can do for the community, whether it comes to buying great software for our tax collector or doing something for our recreation department or something else in the community. But that to me is not really a significant contributor to the decision making. And so for me it comes down to impacts specifically. So while I don't like the idea, I'm certainly in favor of the recycling center site for those reasons. So I wanted to say that.
Well, I'm concerned about approving a lease where there's no carriers to date. I have little confidence that MTA is going to come on it since they haven't indicated anything positive up to now. The only comment I will make about monies, if you want, Sean, is that the town could wait 5 years. I mean, the monies are in here, so, that's part of the deal, but the town could wait for 5 years before, possibly wait 5 years before getting any type of money. So, and this is a 50-year lease. Now, I guess that's maybe standard in the industry or whatever, but it's 50 years strictly at Wireless's Edge's call. So.
The way I look at it is if the MTA doesn't agree to come on it, we don't build a tower and we don't lose any money. But I think if we tried, to do our due diligence as a town board, and if no one goes on the tower, again, like Sean said, I'm not interested in the revenue. If no one goes on the tower, we don't get revenue for 5 years. We're looking at the impact to the residents, the least impact to the greater number of residents.
Yeah, but you put up a tower, and then MTA comes along and puts up another tower. You know what I'm saying? That's all.
I think 10 years from now we're going to have quite a few more towers in this town.
Could be.
I think that's the reality. As Rich had said, with the changing technology and the 5G, which I am not a technical person, but basically the needs of all of our devices, that we're going to have a lot more towers, unfortunately. So.
And there's nothing to say that Wireless Edge or somebody else couldn't come back and say, hey.
So back to the height of the tower, if we do the 140 feet with the ability to extend, I think we have to put a cap on the max. So we started with the 160.
It was 166.
Right, so
Yeah.
that's it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that would be part of the pre-design anyway, the foundation. really, that 166 is essentially a lease right. So if we were to come back there to expand, just like if we were expanding our ground space, we'd have to come back to you for an amendment to the lease. So at that point, you have a checkpoint.
Anybody in the audience?
Good evening, Legislator Jenny Nasarino. We know that this whole project was driven by the MTA, and I'm happy to hear that there's potential to lower the tower, and I applaud Wireless Edge for taking a risk to engage in a contract, and I'm also happy that you have a provision, should the MTA not come on, that this will be null and void. But Rich, if you want to embellish on this too, during our last conference call with MTA, and Mr. Arthur was on the phone as well, it was sort of a chicken and the egg scenario where Wireless was reluctant to commit, and MTA in turn said that they were reluctant to commit, and the reason being they couldn't commit to a phantom site. There was no site because there was no decision made to designate a site. So in retrospect, the lease that is prepared now would protect Wireless Edge, and they've made that overture and overextended themselves, and thank you for that. But as far as the board's concerned, I know you're maybe apprehensive about the fact whether the MTA will bail out on us. That was also said to them. Rich had indicated, well, what if we go through all this and you guys just go back on your original site? And they almost seemed offended by that, because they said, we've been working 3 years for this common goal. So in my opinion, I don't think they're going to jump ship, because the whole objective from the get-go was to give them the communications they need. Thank you.
Just to expand on that, I had a slightly different take than you did. We've been working with some people from Metro North MTA who have been very, very good to work with, and trying to accommodate the town, recognizing that, you know, we've worked diligently towards a goal of trying to find a better site. What concerned me the most is those people that we've been working with seem to have been pushed to the side. An individual with MTA police seems to have taken lead and wants to change the terms. And it wasn't that he wouldn't commit to a phantom site. I don't think if we had a cell tower up in the air looking to put him on, would he commit. He was just not gonna agree to anything at that point.
I agree with what you're saying, but that was the terminology that he used. I'm just quoting what he said. He wouldn't commit to a phantom site. And he was driving the bus during that conversation, no doubt about it. But I think it was just to emphasize the deadlines they have, the commitment they need, and the fact that their back was against the wall in terms of moving forward with the project. And with not having the ability to really say anything more, they just kept re-emphasizing the fact that by September 1st they needed to have some ducks in a row. And it was driven by MTA police.
They changed the terms.
They did.
Mid-deal, where it went from you need to do A, B, and C to you need to have it all done, without exception.
Agreed. But at the end of the day, we still have to make a decision where this tower is going to be, because it's going to be one place or another, regardless of what comes down. They could go back to their site tomorrow, and that would be the end of that. So it's a tough decision. It's a very big decision, and that's why I'm happy there's potential that the monopole could be lowered to be less offensive. But that being said, this is what you're faced with. So tonight, you would have to, I guess, make a decision in order to move forward, or they were very clear in saying, we'll just do what we have to do and go back to the 164 site.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening. Good evening. Christy Jacinto, 170 Somerset Drive. Good evening. Good evening. Appreciate your time this evening. I appreciate. I'm sorry. I am not a mic guy, but is it on?
I got it.
You got it? Cool. Okay. So appreciate your time. It's obviously a heart-wrenching process for you folks, and the audience. There are people here who stand to lose on one way or the other, whichever the decision is made. I, full disclosure, live on Somerset Drive, and I will look at the recycling center. So I'm happy to say that at the outset. So I am inherently biased in my view of whether the town should consider the recycling center versus something else. But a couple of things I think it's worth noting for the town, or at least from the perspective of a resident. I'm all for progress. I'm all for having increased cell access, especially for police and emergency services, and especially for the town, and especially for my kids who love to play on their gadgets. And my wife would scream at me for saying that or acknowledging it in front of you guys. But the flip side is that it seems like we're hurtling towards a decision that's been put upon us by the MTA to try and decide this under their terms, under their deadlines that they've imposed, for the benefit of really nothing, because they're not going to pay. That's what I've heard through the brief time that I've been involved, and I know Mr. Williams has been painstakingly negotiating with them for 3 years. One of the things I've heard mentioned is the fact that even if the tower goes up in the recycling center, that there is no guarantee that the MTA won't go back to 164 and put up a tower anyway. So that's troubling, potentially, because this heart-wrenching decision, where people have really undertaken a lot of thought, and Mr. Rogan, your comments were heartfelt about the fact that people are going to lose no matter what, will be all for naught because the MTA is going to do what it wants to do, probably for the betterment of everybody, but there be it. And the other things that I've learned that seem to be important for the people in the town, and I know it's not just a money thing, but there's a very real possibility that the town couldn't make a dime on this thing, right? And I know they're trying to build in contingencies. You guys are very concerned about taking it down, the cost of that, who's going to bear that. And I get that Wireless Edge is going to bear those costs. But it's no small thing to understand that once the town does sign the lease, Justin or Jordan, you know that the town has very little recourse to change the fact that that tower is going to go up. Well, I would say that you know from your experience that in other circumstances that's a difficult process, right?
If we can keep the comments
Yeah.
forward to the
So
board.
I apologize. So the concern is that there's no money potentially on the horizon. There are no carriers currently lining up to jump on this tower, and the MTA will not pay. So I know there are a lot of humble opinions that have been voiced by folks who also have a skin in the game because they're going to be looking at the tower at the other location as well. From this person, I would say that it seems the old adage from Ben Franklin makes sense. Haste makes waste. Do we really want to be saddled with potentially a tower, whether it's up for 10 years or 50 years, that the town isn't going to make any money on, or potentially very little, and be an albatross for at least some people who are in the immediate neighboring area, and no guarantee that the MTA won't simply, in a year or two, go a few miles away and put in the site anyway at 164. So I think that it's worth considering that if Wireless Edge isn't going anywhere, and I have a belief that they're a very viable and financially stable company, they're not going to go around, leave town overnight, I don't think. If they're as experienced as they are, that there'll be other opportunities to put in towers either at the recycling center at a more advantageous contribution to the town, better money, carriers have lined up, or somewhere else in the town where either a business is going to prosper and there are more carriers that are ready to line up and jump on the pole, or the MTA will be able to come to its senses and perhaps offer compensation. Maybe that's a ridiculous statement, but
I
nonetheless.
see you know the MTA.
I've only heard things through the grapevine, but I understand that they're a difficult, if any, negotiating partner. So the bottom line is that, again, coming from a completely biased resident, so I put that on the table. But it seems to me, and you have taken a lot of consideration, you've done a lot of due diligence. Why rush to a decision that could impact the town potentially for many, many years, and be labeled an albatross in the name of the board that's sitting here now? So I throw that out there for your consideration, and thank you again for your time and all the efforts you've been putting in, because it's clearly something you're passionate about, and I applaud it. I really do.
Thank you for your
Thank you.
remarks. I will answer one of those questions for you, if I might. The driver in all this is MTA, who has given us a September 1st deadline. Either we're going to commit to this by September 1st and get all the approvals in place, which I don't even know if that's possible, or they're simply going to let the contractor go build on 164. That's the driver. That's the haste. It's not something that we're comfortable with, but it's what it is. Bruce?
I really did ask the right question, didn't I, the first time? We got a lot of information, so that's the positive thing, and I appreciate that. Just a couple of things. Does Edge also have a contract at the firehouse to build another cell tower? Or in the process of considering a cell tower at that location?
We do.
You do. Do you know what the height of that tower would be?
We can't do this back
Oh,
and
okay.
forth.
Oh, yeah, because he's not on mic. Okay, the questions I have is this. We're talking about several things here. And I guess I was vindicated because at the last meeting, not at the special meeting, but at the last meeting I spoke, it was suggested that I was looking to bully the MTA. I think I've been vindicated because I think the bully is the MTA and not Bruce Major. So I'll just make that point. The question I have is, you're looking to put in another cell tower at another location. How does that impact? And do you have carriers for that other one proposed? I'll ask my series of questions and you can answer them. Do you have carriers already for that? Will the height of that tower be taller or shorter? And can, if MTA goes forward, and I'm not so sure they will, but if they decide to go forward at the landfill, can the deal of the two towers impact lowering the heights? Because I'm sure the MTA is looking to view south and view north. So the reality is this: could the MTA, which I'm offended, saying we're not going to pay. Now, if they're at the firehouse, do they have to pay at the firehouse? I guess that's another question. That's a private corporation, I think they would. And then I guess my other question is this: how much total does it cost to put up a cell tower at that height at 164? And then tell me, if the MTA is going to pay for it there, why aren't they paying us at our site? The dollars would be substantially less. And just remember one thing for all of us here. I'm sure you all heard of the payroll mobility tax, okay? I'm sure you have, right?
Oh, we have.
You have. The MTA taxes us for the railroads that we don't use. Some of it, for the privilege of using the railroads. And I think, well, I understand that. Well, maybe they should pay us for the privilege of using our site for the towers. I hope you got all my questions, and we'll see where it goes. Thank you.
John, do you want to respond? It's a totally different site, so you're under no obligation.
All right, so yes, we are working on a project at the fire department. And that's a completely separate area as far as coverage. And we know that because we've been talking to various carriers who are looking at multiple sites. We had one carrier who was looking at both sites simultaneous. So we know that the sites do not overlap from a coverage perspective. The height of that tower, and I'm just going off memory, but I believe it's either 125 or 130. And we do have carriers lined up for that site. We have more than one carrier lined up at this time. Now, as far as the MTA, I think there's zero chance that the MTA is going to reimburse us for the tower. Ironically, we know that as part of their deal with their tower company that would build the 164, they are paying them, or they would pay them to build that tower as part of their deal with them for free rent. We also know that that company would then lease space out to other wireless carriers. So, you know, it's pretty much guaranteed that once that tower is established, that's where the carriers are going to go. So the MTA or the MTA's tower company will be collecting rents on that, and other carriers will utilize that site. No carrier is going to build a new site if there's an existing tower nearby. And that's why we're taking the bet that for the recycle center, the carriers are going to go there because it's going to be an existing structure that they can go on pretty cost effectively. Did I get all the questions?
One more question. If it wasn't one of Bruce's, it's one of mine. Is there an opportunity to put Metro North on the fire department tower as a way to minimize the height over distance?
We asked them that question, you know, would they want to utilize that tower? And they said no. They said it was too far north. It creates a coverage hole. And I'm just relaying what they told me, that they create a coverage hole to the south.
Yeah, but that wouldn't be the case if they had both the recycling center and the fire and the Patterson.
Again, I don't want to answer for the MTA, but I believe one of the big costs for someone like the MTA or even a wireless carrier is the cost of the equipment, much more so than the rent or the site itself. So, typical site, they're going to put antennas on, they're going to add an equipment shelter, their radio equipment. That's a substantial investment, and they're not going to want to duplicate it. It's the same thing with the wireless carrier. What tends to limit their budgets and their sites is how much they're spending on equipment.
True, but maybe if we say please in just the right way.
Usually there being counters.
Would you be willing to consider it?
If MTA said we can go lower on this site and go lower and go on the other site, yeah, I mean, obviously I would be willing to let MTA on the other site. If that lowers the site, that's fine. As long as the height of this site doesn't get to the point where I can't co-locate on, because then I'm spending money on a site with no hope of getting a wireless carrier on to recoup the costs.
Okay.
Makes sense.
The one thing I would point out, though, with respect to the fire department property, you know, that's not town-owned property. So in terms of the zoning and timeframes, I don't know if that would meet the MTA's deadline.
Nope, it doesn't. I understand that. I also understand that we're not asking the fire department. I know there are members of the fire department here, but, you know, we're not, you know, they're not here to represent the fire department, I believe, in,
right,
you know, making you know, commitments. So there's a lot of moving parts to this, but it is an interesting concept. I think so.
And I just want to, for the public, a couple of speakers prior to Bruce. Again, the town has the right to terminate this lease to the extent that the MTA doesn't commit within 1 year following governmental approvals. So you've minimized your risk with respect to two towers. You've minimized it. And then also with respect to the town not receiving any, you know, financial incentives, again, the recoupment period is limited to 5 years. So to the extent the tower is built, it's very likely that the town will receive revenue for 45 years.
Thank you. Anyone else? Margaret?
I think
everybody. My name is Margaret Kessman. I live on Cornwall Hill Road. I just wanted you to let you know that it's not visual for us, even though we can see it. What's going to plummet is my property value because it's the adjoining lot, which is worse than visual. So I just want to know how much more junk are you going to put next door to me? I mean, the solar panels went up. I can get a sunburn from them. They're that close to my house. Is there any more room that you're going to be sticking anything more over there that is going to drop my property value any more lower?
There's nothing currently planned other than the cell tower.
And with you not having MTA on board yet to sign this contract, what happened with Sean at the last meeting? He wanted to help new businesses in the town, and let's, you know, help them so they don't go under. And if you're not having MTA come on board, why aren't we reconsidering helping the new businesses in town?
Boy, I made a point of going to Reverie Cafe for lunch the other day because I said, boy, I never seem to get over there. We got to support our local businesses. And I went in there and had a very nice lunch with my wife.
That's
and that
good.
was a way to make sure I was spending my money in Patterson as opposed to going maybe north into Dutchess or somewhere else. And so that's a very small token, but boy, I was thinking locally. I go to Tractor Supply all the time, but thinking about just supporting Patterson and the great businesses that we have. And I said it heartfelt when I was talking about Kessman Farms, because I know that no one was around helping those farms back in the day. Today, people talk about gaining money to buy conservation easements and stuff. That didn't happen back in the day when your farm was sold or Burdick Farm was sold in those other areas. And so that is very heartfelt, and I do think that as a community, we need to support the great people we have. And some of these situations wouldn't have occurred. So my little contribution, but it was heartfelt.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? It's the pleasure of the board.
I appreciate the comments that were stated because the recognition to the diligence of this board, especially you, Rich. Obviously, we're all along for the ride, and but you're doing the heavy lifting. And I think, given the situation, I think we need to move forward with at least taking a risk here and seeing where it goes. If it doesn't go anywhere, then we know what we're going to end up with. It's going to be the 164 site. So, as you said, inaction is still an action. Mm-hmm. And I think we need to take an action.
With the various comments about making adjustments to the lease, I mean...
If you're going to introduce the resolution, then I would recommend that we add a new clause in here just prior to the last clause, which says upon review, help me out.
We typically
Review
have...
and approval of the town attorney.
Yeah, subject, execute the lease. The supervisor would be authorized to execute the lease in form satisfactory in the form presented with such changes as are satisfactory to the supervisor and the town attorney.
That should be added in.
Hold that thought, Tom.
Hope somebody remembered it.
We will move on this. Okay. So I will make a motion that the town board approve to lease a portion of the town property to Wireless Edge Fairfield Group LLC, and that including the in accordance with the state environmental conservation law. Would that be sent? And
You're introducing the resolution. You can ask that it be entered into the minutes as though read.
Read. Okay.
For a resolution approving a lease agreement with Wireless Edge, or whoever the carrier is, because we've changed it a couple of times. An issuance of a negative determination of significance under the State Environmental Quality Review Act. You got the resolution.
And it's
So-
Fairfield, sorry, John. Fairfield Group LLC.
So moved.
Second.
Eileen, can I get a roll call?
Sure. Mr. Cook?
Nay.
Mr. D'Andriano?
Yes.
Mr. Rogan?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Williams?
Before I vote, I just want to say I totally agree with Sean. I've worked very hard on this lease agreement to make sure the lease agreement was in the best interest of the town of Patterson, but the lease agreement, and as much as we've discussed it here, is secondary to the real issue about the impact to our residents. No matter where we put a cell tower, it's going to impact somebody, and that is truly unfortunate. I wish there was a better way to do this. I wish there was a better type of technology that didn't produce the concerns that we have with the proliferation of cell towers. That being said, I am going to vote yes. Motion carries.
Do you want to let the room straighten out, or are
We
people staying?
can. Mr. Arthur, please call me before you call MTA.
Okay. A couple of housekeeping issues. We need to modify a budget transfer request number 19 that was approved previously to adjust a transfer from contingency from $100 and sending it to receiver of taxes training line of $100. So we'll make that modification to budget transfer request 19. So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. And then we have a couple of other transfers from our fiscal office. One is for the purchase of the new chipper that we had discussed several times. We need to transfer $8,290 to sale of equipment and increase the expense account in machinery and equipment and capital outlay by that same amount. We have budget request transfer 22, which is for the whopping amount of $1 coming from the employee benefit expense account and going to serial bond interest account. And I will make those motions on those two budget transfer requests 21 and 22. So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Make a motion to table transfer request number 23, which was for some assessor training account requests. So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. And I will also, this is for the transfer for the requirement or the request to replace a filing cabinet in the assessor's office. We need to transfer 300.
That's the.
Oh, that's the
budget.
same one. I
That's
apologize.
budget
Thank you.
Request
I
number
apologize.
23.
All right, so then the other item we have is a reimbursement for a lifeguard from the Putt Lake Park District, and we had approved reimbursement for $300 for a particular lifeguard training. The amount of the class was actually $350. Given the idea that we are incredibly short-staffed this year on our lifeguards, and with the recommendation of the Park District, we would like to approve an additional $50 to Sarah Catalano for the reimbursement of her lifeguarding and waterfront management class and CPR. So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, first on my agenda is the castle in Putnam Lake. We've received the recommendation from the Putnam Lake Park Advisory Board for the purchase of the castle. They have given us a list of how they would like to see it used. We've retained the services of an engineer and an architect to help us evaluate this. We have yet to receive the reports back. I did contact them this week, and I am pushing them along to get us something back. But we need to make a decision on this fairly rapidly. I will tell you that the purchase price has gone up by $10,000 to account for the new tax levy. And also, they are getting ready to put it up for auction. So if we're going to move, we need to move rather quickly. Anybody have any thoughts on this?
What's the new purchase price?
I believe it's 159. 159,000.
Has,
Well, certainly, I think we need 2 different reports, so, and I agree, we have to move fast, but I think we need those reports.
that was my question, was going to be
I mean,
about
that's the
whether
purchase
we've
price,
gotten
it doesn't
report
talk about a
from-
renovation price, it doesn't talk about a maintenance price, or whatever.
Yeah, I don't think we know what we're getting into yet, so I don't think we can really make
All
a
right,
decision.
I will press on to try to get those reports, and we'll put it on for the next agenda.
Good.
The one concern also that I know we've discussed and Don had weighed in on is some of the concerns with the ownership of the property with the condo or co-op
Yes.
organization and how the town would be a party to that. That's very concerning to me, especially when it comes to ability to use the property for what we need. So,
It's a condominium unit.
yeah.
Be part of it.
Is there an auction date?
He did not give me an auction date. He said he was in the process of setting it up. All right. Second item on my agenda is we are putting in an application, again, to try to extend the Dorset Hollow water system down to Front Street to provide a source of potable water. In our attempts to try to encourage more activity down on Front Street. The grant application going in is for $931,547. The environment for grants is not getting any better out there. This is a 40-60 match. So assuming we go forward with this, we would need to structure a method of coming up with the additional 40%. So, and the grant is through the New York State Drinking Water Infrastructure Improvement Act. Having said all that, I'd like to introduce this resolution for the town board to acknowledge submission of the grant application in the amount of $931,547 and ask that it be entered into the minutes as though read. I get a second?
Second. I just have one comment.
Yes.
This is the project that Ron Gaynor worked on, right, and gave us a report to?
Correct.
Yeah, that's okay.
We've
Thank
got
you.
a couple of other projects we're going to talk about under other business, if I can bring them up, but
Sure.
I'll save all that for later.
I just thought, because I have that homework.
Okay, Mary, you are up.
Yep, the first item on my agenda is the Red Hawk repairs. This is apparently we're having trouble with the electrical, the security alarm.
The fire panel.
Fire panel.
We'll get there.
So, I'm getting there. Red Hawk Fire and Security has quoted a price for service installation, replacement of the motherboard with a refurbished board, and performance tests on the system. So I motion to approve the amount for these repairs to be done, in the amount of not to exceed more than $1,630. So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The second item on my agenda are 2 items concerning Harvey property. The first one is pertaining to the project located at 22 Libel Place, AKA Harvey property. I'd like to make a motion to approve a resolution classifying this project as an unlisted action pursuant to the SEQR, State Environmental Quality Review. We are declaring the town of Patterson as the lead agency for purposes of an uncoordinated review and determining that the action will not have a significant effect on the environment.
It's actually a coordinated review.
It's uncoordinated in
Where?
the top of the,
Yeah.
you're on the wrong one.
I'm on the wrong one.
Yeah.
Is it
There's nobody who will be coordinating.
I got it.
Are we?
No, I missed that one, but I've worked with the attorney preparing this, not Mr. Rossi, but we actually did a coordinated review.
Okay.
And in the body, the language is that it's coordinated.
So is it uncoordinated
It's
or
coordinated.
coordinated?
It's coordinated.
Sounds so negative.
Can we
said it that way.
coordinate on this?
We are coordinated.
Okay.
That's
So
why we're doing lead agency.
Second.
Yeah, the lead agency was part of that.
Yes, we're declaring the town of Patterson as lead agency for purposes of an uncoordinated.
No, coordinated.
Coordinated review,
Yeah.
coordinated review, and determining that the action will not have a significant effect on the environment. So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
There you go.
Okay, so the second item in regards to the Harvey property, I'd like to make a motion to approve this resolution for the acceptance of a bond dated August 22nd, 2018. Such bond should not exceed more than $450,000, and this is for the acquisition of the land and buildings and the reconstruction and renovations to be used as EMS building at an estimated maximum of, yes, not more than $450,000, and entered into the record as read. So moved.
And the closing costs.
And closing costs, yeah, and closing costs.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Just so the board's aware, Senator Murphy's grant he so graciously secured for us in the amount of $100,000. All the paperwork has been filed with the Dormitory Authority, so we are moving that through the process and trying to get there as quick as we can. Peter?
Okay, my first item is a requisition, request to purchase uniforms for EMS from Denise Montana, our EMS coordinator. She has a memo here, like permission to purchase winter uniforms for EMTs. Is this Golly or is it Galls? Because I'm familiar with
Golly.
Okay. Golly shirts and sports apparel for the cost of $2,699, which includes the embroidery. They've supplied all our uniforms to date with a significantly discounted rate and quality work. The order will consist of 41 long sleeves, 511 performance polos, 3 short sleeve 511 polos, and 14 winter coats. This order will allow for extra uniforms when they're needed going forward. So I'd like to make a motion to approve the requisition to purchase uniforms not to exceed $3,000. So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Next item is a Tomasi variance fee refund. So I have a memo here from the building department. Michael Tomasi of 120 Bullet Hole Road submitted an application to the Zoning Board of Appeals for several area variances in order to construct additions to his home, which is an already non-conforming structure on a non-conforming lot. On further review of the building department zoning denial form, it was determined by this office that Mr. Tomasi will only need 3 variances rather than the 4 that he had already submitted for payment. Therefore, we request a portion of his total application fee of $332.50 be refunded in the amount of $50. So I'd like to make a motion to refund $50 to Mr. Tomasi.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. I just have one last thing. I'd just like to make an announcement about a Boy Scout troop. Patterson Boy Scout Troop 440 is looking for boys ages 11 to 17. The ranks have kind of dipped down a little bit, so they're looking to build up their membership. So if anybody, we do have flyers down at the rec center, and with I guess with your permission, if we could put them out in the front lobby.
Sure. Don't need my permission for that.
Okay, so we'll have them in the front lobby as well. The Scoutmaster is Joseph Rosenfeld, so let's support our Boy Scouts, great organization. Thank you.
I tell you, they do a great job. I go to most of their ceremonies, and it's always a great job. You know, very impressive with the boys. So, good organization. Anything else? Anyone else have any other business?
I do. We received a memo from Matt Chabarro requesting to hire Dorian Galindo as a junior staff member at the rate of $9 per hour. Dorian has a great deal of volunteer experience working with children and adults with various organizations. So I'll make a motion that we approve the hiring of Dorian Galindo for the rec department at a rate of $9 per hour. So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone else have any other business?
Do we do this?
No?
You're on a roll, go ahead.
Want to tackle that one? Yes, I've got it ready to go.
All right. So we have a non-bid procurement request form from our maintenance guru, Dennis Mays, relative to fence repair at the wastewater treatment plant from falling trees after the last big storm. And he obtained 2 quotes, and 2 people did not call him back, so we tried to get 4 people. So the low quote, where am I at here?
So if I could just jump in here, the
Go
low
right
quote,
ahead.
the low quote was $1,480. He's recommending a 20% contingency, so the amount that we're approving is $1,776.
A little unusual, I mean, they...
Well, you know, what happened was we were, approving a specific amount, as you're well aware, and something would come up while they're doing the job, so it would cost an extra $10 or $15 or $100, and then everything would have to come back to the board. So what departments started to do was just automatically start adding money in over and above what the highest quote was. So I've directed everybody, if you feel that there needs to be a contingency, identify the contingency. Didn't quite get there, but based on what we're looking at. But, I know the intent because I had the conversation with him, and hopefully in the future we're going to clean this up.
All right, so I'll make a motion that the town board approve everything that the supervisor just said relative to the wastewater treatment plant, falling trees, non-bid procurement form. So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody else? All right, I've got a couple of things. A few months back, the town hall received a nitrate reading of about 38 milligrams per liter. It was totally inconsistent with the readings directly prior to and immediately after that. We have been running at town hall a nitrate level of about 15 to 19 milligrams per liter since about 2013. That being said, once we got the reading, it was a determination of the Putnam County Health Department that we should immediately put in an RO system because we were over 20 milligrams per liter. After the further negotiation with the town supervisor, we agreed to compromise that we would move forward with a design in the event that the nitrate levels of town hall ever did exceed 20 milligrams per liter, but we would not at this time be required to put it in. So, I have a proposal here. We've been talking with a number of different contractors, but the health department is requiring an engineered design. So I have a proposal here from our town engineer, Ron Gaynor, to finish the design of the RO system for an amount not to exceed $5,600. We have to have this design back to the health department by September 20th. So I'd like to make a motion to approve the amount of $5,600 for the town engineer to design an RO system for town hall, so that we can very graciously flush the water down the toilet.
Do you wish to add a contingency
I do
amount?
not. You did kind of, you did bait yourself on that one.
Listen, I got what I asked for. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the second item that I'd like to bring up before the board under other business is the Alpine Water District. The Alpine Water District was constructed late 60s, it's probably about 50 years old. A lot of the parts to the Alpine Water District are still in use today and are really getting old and tired. And I am very concerned about the condition of the system and think we need to start talking about having some upgrades done to the system. I asked the town engineer and our head of building and maintenance, Dennis Mays, to go conduct an evaluation to confirm my feelings, and they did confirm that we do need to seriously consider doing some upgrades to the plant. I am hoping to chase grant money to do the upgrades as, to the maximum extent practicable, but in order to do that, I need an engineering report. There's no grant program I'm aware of that will do it on my say-so. They want to see a licensed engineer coming up with the estimates. So I asked, again, our town engineer to come up with an estimate for evaluating and coming up with a recommendation for the cost for upgrading the Alpine Water District. He's provided us with an amount, so I'd like to make a motion to approve the expenditure of $3,500 for the town engineer to come up with a cost estimate and evaluation of the Alpine Water District improvements. So moved.
Second for discussion.
Go ahead.
But that cost would be borne by the district users, the account that the district
Yes.
users? Okay,
Yes,
thank
it
you.
would.
And no contingency necessary.
Not on this.
Thank you very much.
Can ride this whole night.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Does anybody else have anything else?
Just one announcement, even though it won't be worth anything for the viewers at home when this hits Monday, but for the people in the audience, and certainly to continue on with what Margaret brought up. This weekend is the Wine and Food Fest at the Patterson Fire Department.
Oh, yes.
Both Saturday and Sunday, I believe. And that certainly is a great showing for our community to come out and support that. The fire department has graciously offered to host that. I think we all will agree that that is a much better site than what we've had in the past, which I think could have caused public safety issues.
Mm-hmm.
So I thank you to the Patterson Fire Department, there's a member here tonight, for offering to, apologize, for offering to host that event, and I hope that it is a great success for our community. So please consider going to the Putnam Wine and Food Fest. They have a lot of great, I certainly know they have a lot of great food planned because I see their permits in the health department. So they have a lot of chefs and a lot of great food planned. So anyway, that's just my 2 cents.
Anyone else? Nope. Public recognition? Anybody have anything they wish to bring up to the board?
Hi, my name's Renee Reynoso, and we reside at 556 Lakeshore Drive. I'm not sure if this is the right venue to ask this question, but on our street, there's quite a curve there and a minimal amount of traffic. Our driveway is not very well seen. So is there some way I can request that a sign be put up that says driveway ahead, one of those signs that you see beside the road?
Well, you can either contact my office in the morning and, we can take a look at it, or you can contact the highway superintendent directly. Either way, he's in the back of the room.
Hi.
And we'll take a look at it. We'll see what we can work out there.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
She spoke up, you get the next one. Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.